This is the start of part 5 of the Motorola 5A7A radio. We had made some, trying to make some continuity checks here between these two connectors which go to the radio, and we're getting a variation of almost open to probably 5-6 ohms, but it varies, so there is not a very good connection on these. These are loose, and this is the loop coil here, and it makes connection by way of the rusty hinges. I haven't figured out how I'm going to deal with that because I don't have any small braid. What I do have is desoldering braid that I could probably use, but it is going to be very noticeable. If you look at the schematic over here, your antenna plugs in to the radio, and you can see it right there. One goes to the tuning condenser, the antenna section, and the other is connected to the common negative, I guess. So as you can see, with those two arrows indicating that it plugs in to the radio and makes connection that way. I tried cleaning this up unsuccessfully. Used Brasso on it, but there's only so much you can do, I guess, and short of painting it aluminum, it's about it. The connections are made through the rusty hinges, and yes, I can take out these small Phillips screws here that you see here where I'm pointing to, and probably get at the wiring, but what I would have to do is figure out how to get a braid to make connection on this. Now let me get you down here as close as I can here. Where am I here? There it is. I cannot see. I gotta look off camera here. Alright, see this? So it's not making good connection here. So that's one strike against it. The other is, electrically, it has to go through the hinge electrically to the coil. Now these are riveted in. See where my thumb is pointing right here? There's a rivet here, and where my thumb is pointing over here. Okay? Those are rivets. So we're not going to remove that, because then I would have to put nuts and bolts in it, and it'll really look like hell. So the hinge really doesn't, other than acting as a hinge, it doesn't stay up. In other words, it falls down all the time. Now what I can do is probably get a braid, bring the wire out, somehow fasten the braid on the inside. There's a coil in here, of course, which will be accessible once I remove these screws here. Okay? So I have to tap inside and bring the braid out. But there's going to be a problem getting it onto the other side there to come over to here. You need to have the radio connect onto these pins here. Otherwise, you can't solder it on here. Well, you can, but it's that much harder to pull the chassis out, as you got these wires here which connect to it, and they plug in. Now, when I was trying the radio out on part 4, the radio wasn't going and you just got static, which would seem to indicate the local oscillator may not be working, which Jim Asbell pointed out, and I kind of suspected that anyways. However, if your antenna coil is not in circuit because of the bad connection here, that would do the same thing. So when I got into the shop this morning to start on this part 5, the first thing I did before I unhooked all my electrolytics that you saw on my Rube Goldberg setup here, I unhooked the 2 clip leads that I had going from here to the radio and put an ohm meter on here, and it read 100 and some thousand ohms. So I wiggled these around, wiggled the lid around, and I got a lower resistance, so it varied all over the place. Right now, I'm going to put a meter on it again. The last few times I put it on, it was relatively low resistance. It was varying between 10 ohms and about 4 ohms, depending whether I move these around or this. So we know this one's loose, this one's loose. They shouldn't be going side to side like that. And they're crimped in. I don't know if solder will take to that. I will definitely try to solder it. I have to see if I can get a scraper with my X-Acto knife. I have to use a large wire brush to get in there and probably clean it and put some soldering flux in there and try to solder that. But that's only going to solve that problem if I can get that to stay solid electrically and mechanically. But it's not going to solve the problem of the rusty hinge, because the rusty hinge is needed to make the electrical connection between this coil and that pin I just showed you. Okay, I got the clip leads on. It's 9.3 ohms. Now we'll move this back and forth. I'll take you over to the ohm meter so you can see it. I'll start moving it. I'll let you know. I can't show both things at once here. I moved it to the right. I moved the pin to the left. The cover is open. All right, the lid is open. We'll move this back and forth here. .5 ohms extreme right. 7.2 ohms to the left. In other words, I'm moving this to the left or the right. So that shows you it's not making good connection here, but that's only part of the problem. The rusty hinge is the real big problem. When these radios were new, electrically, it was connected good through the hinge. There isn't much you can do. As you saw, the hinge is very, very rusty. Let's try to move this one here and see what we get. So, DC resistance is changing on this. Let's see if we get any variation here. Yes, it's going all over the place. Okay. Yep. So we have a problem, Houston. We have a problem. Turn that ohm meter off. So that is going to be a big major problem, and I wasn't going to do any more on this radio, but damn it all, I'm frustrated because I can't get the parts I need and get going, but I can't do nothing until I fix this now. Now that's going to be a problem on all these type radios that have antennas in the covers and when the cover opens like that. So your Motorola radios of this type are all going to have the problems in these areas. And the only way you can fix it is to have an unsightly braid coming down from the coil, over here and to the pin. I might have to do that, you know. And as far as this cover staying up, it won't, because the pins, the spring is shot. There is some kind of a spring in there. My eyes don't permit me to see that. So I'm not too proud to ask for help when it comes to these things, because there are a lot of you guys out there that are a lot more experienced with this stuff than I am. It's not like a computer thing, which I'll never ask questions about again. But when it comes to radios, yes, I'm not too proud to ask for help. I am no Mr. Carlson, and I am no radio mechanic. Those guys are great, and you know, I'm not in their same class. However, there isn't very much on YouTube on these radios, at least this model anyways. So that I have to deal with. And as I said before, this radio has a better cover. It's not broken here like the other one, but it has a rusty faceplate. The other one has a better faceplate, but this part is bad. But the hinges are broke on the other one too. So there's supposed to be a little spring action here. There is very little. You can feel it, see, when it comes up. But not enough to hold this cover up when the radio is on. See? I mean, that's the way it's going to run when you're using the radio. That's not really good. Not a real big deal if I can just get a way of making connection from here to the coil and bypass the hinge. What I will try to do, and I'll do that off camera and not necessarily on this video, is I'll try to get in here and see if I can get some solder on that rivet so that this thing will be solid and, you know, no longer moving around, because it's obviously not making good connection. So you lose a few ohms of DC resistance here, and any interruption in the continuity of this coil by way of bad connections here, the radio's not going to work, or it's not going to work properly. It's going to be loaded with static. Okay. So that is that on that. That is that on that? That don't sound right. This apparently is the oscillator coil where my thumb is right there. And there is a wax cap right here I'm pointing to with my thumb right there. That I should have no problem getting at. But when I get that antenna fixed, I will replace this cap also. Who knows, the local oscillator might run. I remember mentioning in the beginning of this video, let's see, what's the 3S4 I think is over here. I think so. Yeah, because there's that tubular coupling capacitor, 4,700 Mickey mics right there. So that's a 3S4. As I recall mentioning in that video, my earlier videos, either part 1 or part 2, these two tubes tested good. This is a 1U4. It tested marginal. I have to look at the tube manual or look at the schematic, because I don't know which one's the oscillator. Some guys can just rattle off just on tube number and know what whether it's an oscillator or IF tube or whatever. I have to look it up. I cannot remember. There's too many things to remember in this old goat. Like I say, I'm not too proud to ask for help when it comes to radio work. I like to show what I'm trying to do. And, of course, as always, trying to get work on a crowded chassis has always been a big challenge for me. But I do try my best. There is still no information out there that I can find as how to remove the speaker, so that I can probably do a better job getting at some of these other caps. One of my viewers had mentioned something about the rider's manual has, unless I read the comment wrong, has the information as to how to get the speaker out. I don't have that information. I do have the rider's schematic, but that's all I have. And it's not as clear. It's very hard to read. It's not written out nice like the Sam's here. So, but that's all I have in riders. And yes, Sam's is good in a lot of ways, but Sam's does not tell you how to remove the speaker. Tells you nothing about that at all. My feeling is it's not a serviceable part. What is serviceable is the capacitors, if you can get at them, and the tubes. So really, that's it. I don't think these things were ever built to tear down and repair. What I got to do is to get some more oil in here. For some reason, this tuning cap is very hard to turn. So I have to neaten up my workmanship in here. This is temporary, of course. That blue 100 microfarad 50 volt electrolytic that replaces the 80 microfarad 25 volt. My mind went blank there. Nothing new. One of my viewers made a comment about the electrolytics in the filtering. Said that there were 150 volts, not 160. Well, if you know anything about radio, done any radio work recently in the last 10 or 20 years, or maybe even longer, 150 volt electrolytics are passé. Everything is 160 now with the higher line voltages and so forth. So yes, the electrolytics were rated years ago at 150 volts, but everything is 160 volts now, especially your All-American 5 AC operated radios, your series sets. You don't want to put in 150 volt electrolytic if you had one. You want 160 volts because the line voltage is higher. Not so much here. We don't have good high line voltage. We're lucky if we get 120 volts. But there are houses that have 127 volts. And that's way too high for radios like this, or even the All-American 5 radios. And if you put 150 volt electrolytic in there to replace the 150s that were in there, you're running on the borderline of blowing the electrolytics out. So you replace them, always go a little higher in the voltage. However, I can't go using these. That's a 450 volt, 22 microfarad electrolytic. It's a waste of electrolytic, money-wise and everything. And I only got 2 of them. I don't have a big stock of these things. So once again, not trying to sound like a broken record, although I probably am. But when I get the parts, I'll work on this. Meanwhile, I will, and I know I keep saying this, going to be another rotten weekend. We're going to have a damn snow and rain and everything else again. So today is Friday, so we're going to have another rotten weather event again coming. Nothing new. I'll be glad when spring gets here, if it gets here. We'll probably get a lot of rain and everything else, so what else is new? So, That's the story there. I will be putting the line cord in. It's just that it's in the way right now. We're running on the original selenium at this time. As I showed, we're getting about 96, 97 volts on the input filter on this, as I showed you on part 4 if you watched it. So, we're not too bad off. So the selenium is doing its job and may be okay. But we got to deal with this. And all I have for braid is solder wick. I've used it before. It's braid and it's tinned. It has to have flux in it, so it'll take the solder. And it makes a good braid. It's not all that big. It may not be that noticeable, but I either have to put it on the inside or somehow connect it this way on the opposite side. But it's going to show, when the radio's closed, you're going to see the braid coming down, maybe from the outside of the hinge over and under and through here, and it's going to short out to the frame. So we can't have that. So I got to figure something out. So I don't need to buy any braid. I've got plenty of solder wick. I don't use it all that much, so it'll make a good braid to electrically connect the antenna loop coil to those pins. And I will try to solder those pins off camera, and the next time I come back on, I'll either show you I did it or I didn't, and probably take that thing and open it up, because I got to wait for parts, and I can't order anything, as I keep telling you, for quite a while. So I might as well try to fix that so that at least that is working. So that's going to conclude part number 5, and I know it's a show and tell, but that's all I can do, folks, right at this stage of the game. So I want you to know that, that's the way it's going to be, and so we're going to work with that and working on this off camera at this time. My battery's going in the camera. I haven't charged it. I haven't put another battery in since part 4, so I think it's time to charge the battery. So I want to thank you for watching. This concludes part number 5. I have to think about that a little bit. So that concludes part number 5 of the Motorola 5A7A radio. Thanks for watching.